Neo's Fox by Vincent Darkfire, Chapter 4. Young hurled through the air, flipping and using amber silica to prolong her flight. From the ground, her silhouette framed by the sun, her golden yellow hair lit ablaze by the sunlight and the fiery discharges from her weapons. Yang looked like a dragon spewing fire. The golden-haired girl's flight was interrupted by gravity as her flight path was pulled into the tree line. Thinking fast, Yang maneuvered in the air to kick the trunk of the tree on the other side of the one she's currently tearing through. Kick off that one, descending downwards a bit, forward, bit more, then forward. She kicked off the next tree and the next, finally rolling over the ground to shed excess momentum. Nailed it, she declared as her roll ended. Yang's cross position helped her jump forward, sprinting through the forest looking for her sister. It wasn't long before she'd begun to realize the futility of running full tilt into nothingness as she slowed down to a bored saunter. Hello! Yang shouts into the seemingly perpetual ocean of dull brown and bright greens surrounding her. Getting bored here, she mumbled after a moment of silence, answered her call. To the left, Yang heard a bush rustle, thinking it was her sister, purely out of concern and desperation for interaction. Ruby, is that you? She asked as she moved a branch out of the way. Yang looked up. Nope. She popped before jumped out of the way of the two Ursa minors she disturbed. The two bear grim stopped their fruitless charge, turning to growl menacingly at her. Yang ignored the boring threat, asking, "You wouldn't happen to have seen a little girl in a red hood, have you?" The Ursa roared in response. Yang activated her gauntlets. "Could have said no," she said as one of the grim charged her. Swiping its massive paw at her, the golden-haired beauty somersaulted backwards away from the attack, laughing as she tossed her hair back. Geez, you two couldn't hit the broadside of a ba. Yang stopped as she noticed a single strand of hair danced towards the ground out of the air before her. Her fists clenched as she darkened as she glared at the ground. You! She growled in barely contained wrath. The two grim glared at each other, making sounds of confusion, then turned back to Yang. The pyromancer punched her fists together, releasing a torrent of aura, igniting the air around her, the heat making her hair fly upwards as she screamed, "Monsters!" She rushed forward, unleashing a brutal combination of fire and shotgun-infused punches that literally lifted the death-black beast from the ground, ending it in a haymaker that catapulted the decimated Grim past its companion. She barely heard the roar of the other Grim as she glared at the demon, bellowing, "What, you want some too?" The soft whispered thump of a blade sinking into its flesh and the striking bone could be heard over the snarling of the Ursa as it rose to its back two legs and attempted to roar again. Instead, it uttered a low yelp, a jumping sound as it sunk to the ground and began to evaporate. Yang watched the blade be pulled towards its owner, bleak, as she sheathed her sword, staring at the felled beast. I could have taken it, Yang thanked as the black-haired girl smirked as she rolled her eyes at Yang. In a tree somewhere else. Yang looked up at the red and gold spear that nailed him to the trunk of a tree by his hood, however miraculously that could be. Feeling hopeless, the white-armored boy hung his head, groaning, "Ah, why does this always have to happen to me?" He shook his blonde hair about his head disappointedly as he remembered everything that's gone wrong. First, Mom forgot to send my toothbrush. Then I slipped a vial of dust. Dust! John repeated as he again tugged on the spear, nothing giving. He again hung his head. Then I bite my tongue. After all that, just this morning. The blonde arc could only sigh at his luck since arriving at Beacon Academy. John tried to pull Pyro's spear from the trunk again, and again, nothing happening. Then he tried to wiggle it up and down. All he accomplished was realizing how weak he is as his arms grew tired and his breath got heavier. Ugh. No wonder Whis! The bright-clad Harris stepped out of the trees, thorns, and bushes with delicately in elegant stumble. Ow. John froze, barely breathing. There, standing before him, was Weiss, the first girl to kinda, sorta, almost compliment him at Beacon on the first day, no less. Okay, John, play it cool. However, all John could muster was a weak wave and nervous chuckle as he still clutched the spear with the other hand. Weiss probably turned around and walked back through the bushes. John hung his head in defeat. Smooth, Ark, smooth. John, the meek boy looked at the who called his name. Are there any spots left on your team? Pyra asked from below his perch, his arms crossed as he smiled up kindly. The meek blonde gave his new partner a shy smile. Yeah, there is. John realized his position as he left his shoulder sunk. But could you get me down from here? Seriously, I have a fear of heights. Pyra smiled up at her partner, and an extremely quiet chuckle whispered past her lips as she thought she saw him right where she wanted him, with Ren. The quiet, green silk-clad boy meandered through a clearing with tall grass, his senses stretched and tensed, wary of any grim that may attack. Ren tensed as his aura alerted him to unwanted eyes on him. Like a rabbit, he jumped out of striking distance of the King Taijutsu that attempted to sneak attack from behind. Hissing in irritation, it circled its newfound prey. Ren thrust his palms forward, triggering mechanisms up his sleeves that propelled his storm flower into his grasp. The giant black snake locked eyes with Ren as if taking measure of the young husband's skill, Ren doing the same to the giant snake. The king lunged forward, an attack Ren saw coming as the green-robed boy jumped over the lunge, unleashing a flurry of bullets into the hard scales on the Grim's back. Seeing his attack wasn't doing any damage, Ren changed the tactics. He pivoted in the air and landed on the back of the snake, running along the spine of the undulating serpent, using his dual pistol daggers to probe for weak points by firing at various places along the Grim's hide. The King Taijutsu didn't really like that apparently. The black serpent quickly reared and lunged at the annoying green huntsman. Ren jumped over the telegraphed attack, jumping over the head of the snake. Turning around in the air, Ren slammed his stormflower into the back of the black serpent's skull. The momentum of the snake's lunge carrying it forward, skidding across the ground and throwing Ren forward. Ren rolled forward to release his excess momentum, taking a ready stance with his weapons as he faced the demon he'd just slain. Waiting a moment, the white head of the King Taijutsu struck, knocking Ren's stance off kilter. The gap in concentration allowed the black head to lunge forward and send the non-green huntsman to the dirt. As Ren recovered, both heads of the King Taijutsu encircled him tightly, the coils noticeably encroaching upon him. Not wanting to get crushed, he concentrated his aura into his legs, crouched and pushed hard off the ground. His jump took on an added spin as he racked a stormflower over the hard scales of the serpent's sides. Ren then began to concentrate his fire on a scratch he's seen his blade left on the scales of the black taijutsu. The white serpent didn't like that and rushed to the green annoyance. Ren contorted his body as the white devil whispered past him. Not one to miss an opportunity, Ren stabbed one of his blades into the base of the white snake's skull. knowing that just stagnate again won't do anything more than stun the beast. Ren forced the aura into his other blade and thrust the wickedly curved blade into the spine of the snake. The snake stopped cold, no forward momentum, no crashing force, nothing. The black Taijutsu, angry that its other half was terminated, thrust forward intent to bite the damn green demon. Ran held his hand out towards the incoming bite, protecting a small field of protective aura between the demon and himself. As the serpent hit the field, Ren was forced to use both hands to keep up the aura. Thinking fast, Ren concentrated aura into his hands themselves. The aura no longer being projected, the snake's fangs were caught by Ren using the aura. He is concentrated in his hands and his family's micro movement techniques. Ren snapped the fangs of the king's jaw. The great serpent reared back, shaking its massive head in agony. If Grim can even feel pain, that is. Ren looked at the great snake, dropping one of the fangs as he took a battle stance, waving the King Taijutsu toward him, as if saying, "Come on." Now angrier, the snake returned to base instinct and lunged again. Ren simply sidestepped the attack, stabbing the fang of the serpent into its own eye. Stunned at the turn of events, the black snake just laid on the ground. Rand, not one to let a job go unfinished, channeled aura into his palm as he pulled his hand back. His fingers clawed inward and thrust his palm into the blunt end of the fang protruding from the king's eye, simultaneously forcing his channeled aura into the creature of Grim. The result of the light of aura being forced into the darkness of Grim resulted in a negation of space and sudden vast release of energy. The Black King Taijutsu had exploded, leaving a gooey, black, evaporating mess on the clearing floor. Ren began to dust himself off as he heard hissing emanating from his right, turning to see the white snake rise from the ground, glaring at him with even more malice than usual, and lunged at him. Not allowing even a moment of hesitation, Ren threw himself at the remaining head of the King Taijutsu with Whis. The pale Harris blocked a Beowulf's swipe at her back and parried it away. Now looking at the back of wolves she'd stumbled upon, she held Mary Marston Esther ready before her. Weiss began to coach herself. Remember your training, Weiss. Head up, shoulder back, 1 foot forward. Not that forward! The Beowulf slowly began to encircle the young huntress as she coached herself, the alpha wolf standing directly in front of her, only a couple dozen feet away, warily watching her every move. The great horned alpha Beowulf noticed the weapon in Whist's hand begin to move and whirl. The beast crouched low, preparing for a battle, as the white huntress also took her stance, her weapon flowing with burning energy. Steady your breathing, and now! Weiss lunged forward, her Mertonaster glowing an angry red. The alpha Beowulf deepened its crouch, about to pounce on the pale girl that volunteered as tribute, just before an explosion of red petals and a curved blade gouged its bone face plate. Weiss stumbled, taken off guard by Ruby's appearance, barely able to redirect the deadly burning power of Mertonaster into an unsuspecting tree. Settling it ablaze, Weiss ultimately fell onto the girl that threw off her groove. Ruby, the red-haired girl, shook her head. "Hey, watch it!" The flames of the destroyed tree began to spread as Reese retorted, "Excuse me? You attacked out of turn. I could have killed you." The disrupted pack of Beowulfs began to circle the two arguing girls. You'll have to try harder than that, than to kill me. Ruby mumbled as she watched the beowulfs encircle them. Ruby flicked a switch on her crescent rose, and her empty clip fell to the ground. She pulled out another with a stylized cross stitched in black on it. Ruby crouched low, swinging the heavy frame of her weapon over her right arm, preparing to remove the wolf pack from existence. The tree that we raised fell between the Harris and the Reaper and the Alpha. The fire spreading, the pack began to run about haphazardly, apparently frightened by the encroaching flames. We looked around at the obvious hazard to her health and took hold of Ruby's arms. "We have to go," she called over the howling of the Beowulfs, pulling Ruby with her. A couple dozen yards away from the would-be battle and the blazing forest on the crest of a small hill, Whis and Ruby came to a stop. Whis' lungs were on fire, a combination of breathing, smoke, and not used to running so far. She had to stop and catch her breath. Ruby took the moment to voice her mounting frustration. "What was that? That should have been easy." Whis was more than a little taken aback. Ruby's childness irritating the posh heiress. "Well, perhaps if you had exercised even the slightest amount of caution with the placement of your strikes," we stressed the slightest with a small space between her pointing finger and thumb, "I would have set the forest on fire." She pointed haphazardly at the fuming, crackling mesh she just escaped. Ruby scoffed. "Ugh, what's that supposed to mean?" Looking hurt. Whis continued using her hands to better pronunciate her point. "I'm just surprised that someone who talks so much would communicate so little during an encounter." Whis waved her arms about to convey her frustration. Ruby crossed her arms. "Well, I'm sorry you need my help to win a fight. I'm just fine on my own." "Well, congratulations on being the strongest child to sneak your way into Beacon," we said pointedly before turning. "Bravo," she said sarcastically. We wandered through a bush, continuing her mission to find the forest temple. Ruby had to do something to vent in frustration, so she screamed as she lashed out on an innocent tree, felling it in one slash. Not caring to see the result of her outburst, Ruby walked away, following her partner. The feather of a freshly killed giant, nevermore, gently billowing down and landing gracefully on the trunk of the now dead tree. After about half an hour of silence and walking back and forth trying to find the right way, Ruby sat in the middle of a clearing playing with some nearby leaves while Whis paced about. "It's definitely this way." Reese walked by Ruby. "I mean this way." "It's definitely this way," Reese pointed as she paced the opposite way, eventually coming to a stop in front of me. "All right, it's official. We passed it." Ruby rolled her eyes as she tossed the leaf she was looking at and got up. "Why can't you just admit that you have no idea where we're going?" "Because I know exactly where we're going. We're going to the Forest Temple." Ruby only offered a frustrated grunt in return. "Oh, stop it. You don't know where we are either." "Well, at least I'm not pretending like I know everything." Ruby's frustration with this high and mighty attitude of Whis began to boil over. "What is that supposed to mean?" Whis glared challengingly at Ruby. "It means you're a big stupid jerk and I hate you." Ruby stomped like a toddler. "Ugh. Just keep moving." Whis turned away to continue her mission. "Oh, just keep moving. Hurry up. Why? Watch where you're going." Whis gave an actual and impressive imitation of Whis, complete with crybaby hands. "Why are you so bossy?" "I'm not bossy. Don't say things like that." Whis looked back as her antagonist. Ruby stepped forward. "Stop treating me like a kid." Whis stood her ground. "Stop acting like a kid." Ruby got closer. "Well, stop acting like you're perfect." Whis closed in kind. "I'm not perfect." The Harris stood back. Not yet, but I'm still leagues better than you. She turned and walked away, done with this foolishness. You don't even know me, Ruby pouted, with Naruto and Neo. Naruto sat on top of the ruins, his mug in hand, just being bored out of his mind. Neo rested her head on his lap, napping off their easy goal. Naruto smiled as her stroked her multiple colored hair. Neo nuzzled his hand as he did so. Naruto took a sip from his mug as he heard, "How about a cute little pony?" The black fox looked down to see Yang holding up a white knight. He smirked at how Yang's grin almost matched his. Sure. Yang looked to see a bored-looking Blake standing not far away, her arms crossed over her bust. Yang and Blake walked to the center of the temple. That wasn't too hard. Yang smiled as she put the totem in the pouch at her hip. Well, it's not like the place is very difficult to find. Blake smiled back at Yang. A screamed echo over the forest. Yang wandered to the edge of the temple. Some girl's in trouble. Blake, did you hear that? What should we do? Yang turned to her partner. Blake's bow twitched as she stared skyward, watching a red dot fall from a nevermore. Heads up! Naruto looked like he was gonna move until he saw something flying at them in the direction, quickly approaching. He calculated the trajectory in his head and sat it back down. He looked down to see Neil still napping. He scooped his ice cream up and jumped down to ground level, using dust in his boots to soften and mute his landing. He made not even a whisper as he landed gently behind Yang. From out of nowhere came the flying body of John, which intercepted the red dot. Ruby, with a resounding "oof!" Blake and Yang followed their trajectory into the tree line. Did your sister just fall from the sky? Blake asked in her trademark monotone laced with surprise. I, Yang began, but was interrupted by trees collapsing across the field. Inerso stumbled from behind the tree line, flailing its arms as if panicking. Suddenly, a pink explosion poofed its existence on the back of the Ursa and a resounding "Yeehaw!" as the Grim fell forward dead. A white and pink thing rolled off of its front shoulders. Nora quickly rose to her feet and looked at the missing creature. "Aw, it's broken!" Fast as the roadrunner, Nora climbed the dead Grim, staring into the dark mist it was emanating. "Ew!" she exclaimed. Ren stepped out from behind the black bear Grim. "Nora! Please!" He stopped to catch his breath. "Don't ever do that again." The Emerald Huntsman hunched over, exhausted after chasing Nora as she rode the foul beast on which she stood. When he looked up to where he last knew his childhood friend, she was gone. Ren looked around, searching for her. Meanwhile, Nora found a pretty golden tower. Ooh! She quickly swiped it up and began swinging. "I'm the queen of the castle! I'm the queen of the castle!" Taking various poses as she balanced the rook on top of her head. "Nora!" Ren shouted from across the field. The red-headed bubble of energy giggled. "Coming, Ren!" As she skipped away. All the while, Blake and Yang just watched. "Did that girl just ride on an Ursa?" Blake asked, almost ditching her monotone. Yang began again, only to be cut off again, this time by a shrill screech behind a sprinting Para, followed by a death stalker that flattened the trees before it. The giant scorpion Grim made to swipe at the crimson and gold goddess, but she flawlessly dodged and rolled out of reach of the claws of the ancient Grim. She screamed the name of her partner, John, more concerned for his well-being than her own. John, hanging in a tree with Ruby, called back, "Para!" The bumbling blonde watched Ruby get up and prepare for a running jump. "Ruby?" The Red Reaper rolled out of her, jumped from the tree, and stood tall. Ruby, the brunette, heard her sister. Yang! She exclaimed as she saw her older sister. They prepared to hug until Nora! The pink and white wearing hammer wielder sprung up between them, scaring the sisters. Blake, ignoring the commotion and watching Pyra run from the Deathstalker, asked, did she just run here with a Deathstalker on her tail? No longer surprised after Nora's entrance. Yang was shaking with rage. There was too much going on. I can't take it anymore! She exploded literally. The air around her flashed with fire as Yang flailed her arms. Could everything just chill out for 2 seconds before something crazy happens again? Naruto could only chuckle as he watched these guys bumble about. Geez, she's pretty angry. He joked to himself. He looked down to his lap to see if Neo's nap had survived the commotion, only to see her glaring up at him with two pink eyes, her glare seeming to say, just no. Ran up beside Nora and Blake, his old friend practically vibrating with energy as he was panting in his exhaustion. Ruby tapped Yang's arm. Yang, her older sister almost imploded as she slumped. Ruby pointed up as everyone would see what she's pointing at. Up at the giant Nevermore that had been circling during the gathering of the students, more precisely the white speck on its tail. How could you leave me? They heard a whiny voice call from the speck. Ruby, shrugging her shoulders as she watched Whis hang on, simply said, I said jump. Ren, Nora, Yang, Ruby, and Blake watched Whis struggle with the Nevermore. Blake was the first to speak up. She's gonna fall. Ruby just said, she's fine. Ren immediately proved her wrong. She's falling. John finally wrenched free of the tree he'd been stuck in, looked up and smiled. He saw his chance to get the girl. Not even thinking, he ran and jumped off the branch to catch Whis. As he caught her, he smiled savantly and asked, just jumping in? Whis looked at him in awe and then looked down. He followed her eyes and realized what he just did. The two plummeted to the ground, John landing first and Whis landing on him. My hero. My back, John said breathlessly as he reached to crawl away, but failed. Pyra missed a step and was batted aside towards the gathering group. She flailed in the air as she careened towards her friends. Pyra bounced along the earth as she landed from the toss from the deadly giant scorpion. Yang chose this time to chime in. Great, now all we need is Foxy and we can all die together. She yelled over the commotion of the approaching Deathstalker. Ruby looked over her shoulder to say something, but her eyes widened when she saw Naruto and Neo behind her yellow-haired sister. Naruto, when did you get there? Naruto was eyeing the Deathstalker like a fox eyes a chicken, devious eyes watching the bone-clad demon. A whisper of a smile appeared on the corner of his mouth, his ears twitching with glee. Naruto was watching his prey get closer and closer, but the fox knew better than to stare too long, and he snapped to Ruby to answer a question. Oh, I've been here for a while. Saw all of your entrances, and I must say it was the most entertained I've been in a while. I was just waiting for Neo to wake up from her nap up on top of the ruins, he explained in depth. No, I meant, when did you get behind Yang? Ruby corrected herself. Yang was surprised when she felt a light tapping on her lower back. Ever more surprised when she reached back to swap whoever it was away, only to get her hand kicked away. Yang spun around to see a peacefully sleeping Neo, only her face twisted into an evil smirk. Naruto? She's done napping. The lavender-eyed brawler deadpanned. The fox faunist looked at the girl he's carrying and smiled lovingly. Nah, she does this in her sleep sometimes. She must be having a good dream. Don't worry too much about it, Yang.